All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and continuation of our RBT exam practice question series. We're going through the next set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. As always, when you pass, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. Allie cuts an avocado in half. She eats one half and leaves the other half on the counter. The half that was left on the counter turns brown. Allie no longer leaves her cut avocados on the counter. What changed Allie's behavior? So we've got a behavior question and a behavior change question. And when we're dealing with behavior change, what are we typically talking about? Typically talking about consequences, because consequences affect future behavior. Behavior is chosen based on consequences. Behavior shaped based on consequences, so on and so forth. So if something is changing Allie's behavior, there's likely a consequence at play. So let's examine what's going on here. Allie cuts the avocado in half. She eats one half and leaves the other half on the counter. As a result, what's the consequence of leaving the half on the counter? That half turns brown. Since then, Allie no longer leaves her cut avocados on the counter. So how did Allie's behavior change? Ask yourself, first, did it increase or did it decrease? Well, we know Allie's behavior decreased because she no longer leaves her cut avocados on the counter. So we're looking at a punishment procedure, right? Punishment decreases, reinforcement increases. Since the behavior decreased, we know it's punishment. Second, was it positive or was it negative? Was something added or was something taken away? Well, the addition of the brown color, the browning on the avocado, has added that to the environment, right? She left the avocado on the counter. As a result, this browning has now appeared. So we've got added, which is positive, and reduction, which is punishment. What changed Allie's behavior? A, positive reinforcement. Well, it was positive. It was not reinforcement because behavior decreased. B, positive punishment. Yes, we have the added brown and the added punishment decreased. And then C and D are both negative. We know it's not negative. Why? Well, nothing was taken away. The consequence was added. Therefore, what changed Allie's behavior will be positive punishment. John learns how to draw a square on a piece of paper. John then starts drawing other shapes like circles and triangles on the same piece of paper. What does this represent? So we've got John, right? And we're looking at John's behavior. He learns how to draw a square on a piece of paper. Great. We're drawing a square piece of paper. John then starts drawing other shapes. So now he's drawing circles and triangles on this same piece of paper. He was taught how to draw a square on the piece of paper. Now he's still drawing on the same piece of paper, but now he's drawing circles and triangles. So what does that represent? A, stimulus generalization. Well, stimulus generalization, how many responses are we looking at? Well, we're looking at a single response across multiple stimuli. In this case, what responses do we have? We have drawing a square, we have drawing a circle, we have drawing a triangle. We've got three responses for the same stimulus. Stimulus generalization, we have a single response for multiple stimuli. So what's happening here is response generalization. He's learned to draw a square. He's now generalizing responses on this piece of paper. Oh, now I can draw circles. Now I can draw triangles. Response generalization involves a single stimulus with multiple responses. Overgeneralization. No, this seems acceptable. It doesn't seem like John is overgeneralizing anything here. Either way, response generalization is more precise. And then D, maintenance. Well, there's no indication he was taught to draw circles and triangles. Maintenance would be if John was able to continue drawing the square after teaching has stopped. Remember, maintenance occurs when you can still perform the response even though teaching is no longer taking place. And that doesn't seem to be the case here because there's no indication John was taught circles and triangles. He's just drawing them. So do we know if they're maintaining or not? We don't know. All we know is John is generalizing his responses of drawing these shapes. A behavior technician tells the client to put the ball on top of the table. Then the technician tells the client to put the ball under the table. Finally, the technician tells the client to roll the ball on the table. What is the technician likely working on? What is the technician doing here? He's asking the client first, put the ball on top of the table. That's one response. Technician then says, well, put the ball under the table. That's a different response. Finally, they say, roll the ball on the table. Yet again, another response. And so what does the client have to do? Well, the client's got to be able to cycle through all these different responses. And is that discrimination? No. Discrimination is when you are telling the difference between stimuli. And this is an important distinction because discrimination and differentiation are closely related in some aspects and can be confusing, and people often mix them up. Remember, with discrimination, also called stimulus discrimination, we're going to have multiple stimuli and a scenario where somebody is able to tell the difference between the different stimuli. This case, we've got different responses. And so when you are telling the difference between different responses or engaging in different responses, you're differentiating responses. So what we're looking at really is C, response differentiation. And that's the key, and you've got to understand the difference between discrimination and differentiation. We've got 3 different responses. The client has to differentiate responses based on what he's asked to do. He's not shaping, there's no approximations going on here. And we're not generalizing because we're not moving to a different setting. It's not a new technician. It's the same teaching scenario over and over again. So we're not generalizing anything. The technician is working on differentiation. He's trying to get the client to start to differentiate between these different responses. In this case, some prepositions and some actions. Which of the following scenarios represents an example of behavior contrast? So questions like these are essentially vocabulary questions disguised as application questions. And if you know the vocabulary word, these are pretty straightforward. So our word here is behavior contrast. And what defines behavior contrast? What occurs with behavior contrast? Well, behavior contrast says if you change a behavior, let's say increase or decrease a behavior in one setting, it's likely to go the opposite way in a different setting unless you implement the same plan in that setting. So if I implement a reinforcement plan at home, which increases behavior, and I don't do anything different at school, it's likely the behavior will decrease at school. That's behavior contrast. So if we're looking for scenarios that represents this, that's what we're looking for, a scenario where behavior is increasing somewhere, decreasing elsewhere, or vice versa. So a behavior plan decreases aggression in the home, okay, and aggression then begins to decrease at school. Is that contrast? Well, no. Contrast would be decreases aggression in home, aggression increases at school. B, a client learns how to read at home and then is unable to read in the library. What's the issue here with B? Well, B is a generalization problem. C, a reinforcement procedure increases requesting for items at school and requesting for items decreases at home. Well, there we go. We've got a reinforcement procedure increasing requesting items at school. So this plan is increasing items in one environment, and then in the other environment, requesting has gone down. This is a really good example of behavior contrast. D can't be the answer because A and B are not behavior contrast. A parent is observing Glenn, a behavior technician, implement discrete trials one day. The parent is curious about what Glenn is doing and asks that Glenn explains it to them. Glenn obliges and walks the parent through discrete trials and then lets the parent conduct some discrete trials. Has Glenn done anything wrong? Now, this should be hammered into your brain at this point if you've been studying a while and studying with us especially. What is the primary role of an RBT? Implementation. All these other things, parent training, assessments, everything else is either done under the supervision of an analyst or if you're given permission. In this case, Glenn, a technician, is being observed, which is totally fine, but the parent asks Glenn to explain it to him. And Glenn just walks the parent through and lets the parent conduct trials, and Glenn just goes through this whole parent training process without ever getting permission or thinking it through. Glenn cannot do this, right? What has Glenn done wrong? A, nothing, as long as Glenn is competent. Despite Glenn being competent, likely competent in discrete trials, we're not saying he isn't, it is not his job and not within his competence to parent train without permission. B, no, nothing. Glenn was correct in allowing the parent the opportunity to implement what was learned. Well, that's not the issue at hand here. Glenn should not be engaging in parent training at all without first receiving permission. And nothing in the question says Glenn got permission. C, yes, Glenn needs permission before conducting any parent training without a supervisor present. C is exactly what we're looking for, right? Before Glenn does any of this, all Glenn needed to do was say, let me check with my supervisor first, get permission, and he's good to go. Communication, communication, communication. Communication is stressed so heavily in our ethical codes and our task list. It's such an important part of the job. Always read all your answer choices. D, yes, behavior technicians should not play a role in parent training. Absolutely not true, right? Technicians are a very important part of parent training and other aspects of treatment, however, with permission. So has Glenn done anything wrong? Yes, Glenn needs permission before conducting parent training, key without a supervisor present. If you are using a punishment procedure in a written behavior plan, what is the least likely outcome of that procedure? What are we worried about when using punishment? That's what the question is asking about. Why is punishment always our last resort? In this case, what is the least likely outcome? So we're going to use punishment. What don't we expect to happen? A, aggression may occur as a product of punishment. Sure, punishment-induced aggression is not uncommon at all. That is likely, right? No, it's not always likely, but it's more likely than maybe something else. B, the client may engage in emotional outburst. Absolutely, punishment-induced emotion is absolutely a real thing and something that frequently occurs. C, a new replacement behavior could emerge. Does punishment teach replacement behaviors? Well, no, because punishment doesn't increase behavior. How can you teach something new if you're not increasing anything? The odds of using a punishment procedure and a new replacement behavior emerging is very low. D, avoidant or escape behavior may become more common. Sure, because things are going to become aversive. More aversives are in the environment. Aggression is much more likely. Emotional outbursts are much more likely. And avoidant or escape behavior are much more likely rather than a new replacement behavior could emerge. One of the downfalls of punishment is we're not teaching replacement behaviors. That's one of the big issues with punishment. Which of the following answer choices is a consideration that needs to be made when reinforcement is written into a treatment plan? So let's think about this. Put on your analyst cap here. We're writing reinforcement into a treatment plan. So we're giving reinforcement, we're increasing behavior, so on and so forth. What is a consideration that needs to be made? What do we need to think about when using reinforcement? Just like with punishment, there are things we've got to consider when using reinforcement. Everything is planned. Everything is systematic. A, when should reinforcement be faded? You absolutely need a plan for fading reinforcement. If we're going to use a continuous schedule, a fixed ratio 1, we absolutely need to plan ahead. When are we going to fade that out? Because if we don't, we're going to have issues fading it out later. Ratio strain jumps immediately to mind, right? We want to avoid things like ratio strain. What about B? How much reinforcement should initially be available? B is also important. Are we teaching a brand new skill? Well, we probably want a lot of reinforcement available early. Are we strengthening a skill that already exists? Are we trying to generalize? Well, then maybe less reinforcement should initially be made available. All these things need to be considered. And yes, this is likely going to be mostly on your behavior analyst, but as an RBT, let's start thinking along these lines. Let's start thinking at a higher level. See, what are some of the client's favorite things? Well, favorite things have nothing to do with reinforcement. What are we worried about with reinforcement? We're worried about what functions as a reinforcer. Just because the client likes something doesn't make it reinforcing. However, you do need to consider, when should reinforcement be faded? How much reinforcement should initially be available? So what is our answer? Well, D, both A and B. You're searching online for recipes to help you decide what you should make for dinner tonight. You're limited on time, so you need a recipe that you're able to complete in under an hour. What skill will help you identify what recipes fit your requirement? All right, we did a response differentiation question earlier. What are we telling the difference between now? Well, now we have a bunch of different stimuli, right? Because we're looking for recipes, but we need recipes that we can complete in under an hour. So the skill that we need is to be able to tell the difference between long recipes and short recipes, recipes that are going to take up all my time or recipes that I can complete in time. So what skill do we need? Well, A, discrimination. I need to be able to discriminate between these different recipe stimuli. This recipe is too long. This recipe fits. That's discrimination between stimuli. It's not differentiation because I'm still picking recipes. It's the same response, right? I'm still cooking. I'm still picking. Responses aren't changing. What we're doing now is telling the difference between stimuli. Again, there is no approximations. Nothing's being shaped. And we're not generalizing to any new environment. Generalization is not in play. What we're doing here is discriminating. Fantastic. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Make sure you like and subscribe. Let us know when you pass. Work hard. Study hard. See you soon.